Today we're going to talk about duplicate stitch. Hi, welcome to CHeri Knits. I love knitting and I want you to love it too. Duplicate stitch is a really easy way to create a design in your knitting, maybe letters or a motif like a heart, and you do it right over your existing knitting. Let's get started. It's December and we're living full-time in the RV, and I'm making new stockings for Brad and I to hang in our RV. And so I want to put our names on the stocking. I started this one with my name, and today I'm going to show you how to put the E on the stocking. So what you want to do is have your piece of fabric that you want to do letters or a motif on, and you want to take some yarn. I like to use yarn that's the same yarn that I use to knit the piece, or you could use something a little bit thicker. You don't want to use something thinner because it won't cover up the stitches. And you want to use a length of yarn that's about 24 inches long. If it's too long, then it's going to get worn as it runs through the fabric, and it's also going to get tangled up probably. So you can use a shorter length of yarn and just add more yarn as you need it. Duplicate stitch is also called Swiss darning. It's usually worked on stockinette stitch, but you can adapt it to work in ribbing or garter stitch or other fabrics. But today I'm going to show you how to put letters on stockinette stitch. So let's take a look at that now. So you can see I have some markers in here. What I did on the stocking is I used markers to mark the half section, the halfway points. And then I did some counting to figure out where I wanted to put the letters. And now we're going to do the letter E. You may be wondering where I found the letters, how I found these charts. And all I did was did a Google search for knitting charts, letters, and there's a bunch of choices for free things that you can get from the internet. You can also find some things that you pay for, but there's a lot of free choices, which is what I did. And so I did some math, figured out where I wanted the letters, and now I'm going to start with the E. I like to work from the right to the left and from the bottom to the top when I do duplicate stitch. I just find that works a little easier for me. So I'm going to come over here and start the bottom of the E. So this is the stitch where we're going to start right here. So I want to take the needle underneath and come up this hole at the bottom of that knit stitch. So I'm going to come up, and then you want to leave a tail inside to weave in. Nothing too long, but you want to have a tail in there to weave in later to catch it. And so I've come up at the bottom of the stitch, and now I'm going to go to the top of the stitch and start right to left and go through and pull it through. Now you don't want to pull it too tight. You just want it to be laying on there to cover it. And then I'm going to go right back down through that same hole where I came up, and that will complete the V. So remember, what you're doing is you're duplicating the knit stitch. You're covering up that original stitch to create a design. And I think I mentioned I like to work right to left. So now I'm going to go one stitch over. I'm going to come up from the bottom, and then I want to go above this stitch here, under the stitch above from the right to the left, pull it through, and then go down. And just repeat that, the number of stitches your chart tells you to go over. And one thing with the chart that you need to keep in mind is that you want to make sure you're looking for charts created for knitting, not charts for cross stitch or any other purpose, but charts for knitting. A chart for cross stitch is going to be square, and your knitted stitch is not square. It's a rectangle. It's wider than it is tall. And so if you use a chart for cross stitch, you're going to get really squatty images. They're not going to be the proper proportion. And so we're just going to continue going along here to finish off the E. All right, now I've gone all the way across and I have the bottom of my E, and now I'm going to start working up. So here is the bottom stitch. Now I want to cover this stitch, so I need to come up this hole underneath that stitch right there. And make sure you don't split your yarns. So come up, and this is real easy. You're just going to pile the stitches on top of each other here. All right, so as I mentioned at the beginning, I prefer to work my duplicate stitches from the right to the left and from the bottom to the top. And so now that I've gotten to the top of the E, the spine of the E, I'm going to pop all the way over here and start working right to left. That's what I did with this section here. So this is the stitch I want to cover. So I'm going to bring the needle and go up that hole there from inside. And when I do that, I'm stranding the yarn across, so I don't want to pull too tight. So I've come up the bottom to the bottom of the stitch, and so I want to go under the stitch above the stitch that I'm covering from the right to the left, pull it through, and remember, don't pull too tight because then it won't cover that stitch. And then come back down and go right back through that same hole where you came up and give it a little pull. And then you've covered it, and now we just work across to complete our letter. So again, we go up at the bottom of that stitch, up the hole, and if you spread it apart, you can see all those holes that I'm talking about. So I'm coming up this hole, and then I want to go to the top of the stitch, under the stitch that's above it, making sure you don't catch the strands of this yarn or your fabric yarn. That'll mess it up. And then come right back down and go down where you first came out. So up at the bottom of the stitch, under the stitch above the stitch you're covering, and then back down. All right, so I finished the E, and it looks good. If there were any problems, I could take my needle and kind of adjust and pull, but I'm happy with the way it turned out. So now I need to weave in the ends from the yarn. And so I'm just going to take this and turn it to the inside, and I'm going to not do anything too fancy. I'm just going to take the yarn and go under and up the red yarn that I used to create that stitch. I don't really want to go through the white yarn because you might be able to see it from the other side, but I'm basically just running it up and down these strands of the red. And one more time and I'll be done. So maybe 1 inch to 2 inches total because I went back and forward. And then you just take your scissors and cut, and that's good. If you're using wool or any wool combination of yarn, you really just need to go about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. If you happen to be doing duplicate stitch on something slippery, a slippery yarn, you might want to go a little bit further. And what you might want to even do is tie your ends together. So once you've woven your ends in, if you had left this one long, you could take these two and tie them together. But I would only do that if you have a real slippery yarn that you're working with. So once you've gone 1 inch to 1.5 inches, kind of working back and forth, then cut your yarn, leaving about a 1/4 inch. And there you have your stocking ready to hang up to get gifts from Santa. All right, I hope that was helpful and you get a chance to try duplicate stitch really soon. And remember, you can do letters on a Christmas stocking, you can do hearts on a hat, you can do all sorts of images and motifs. Just make sure you're using a knitted chart, not a chart for cross stitch, otherwise you'll get funky shapes. And I just wanted to talk about these needles, these darning needles that I use. They're from Hiya. I love them because they have this bent tip, a really nice big eye, and they make duplicate stitch, weaving in your ends, sewing things together so much easier. So if you'd like to get some Hiya darning needles, click the link below for Twisted Yarn Shop and you can find them and get some for yourself. If you make a purchase from Twisted, please use my link below. It helps me to continue to create these free YouTube videos. All right, I'll see you next time.